Sunday morning back at my place. You could sleep late, I don't mind. Break some eggs, make a mixtape, and let it play like 20 times. I ain't got no money, but I got lots of time. So let's spend a little, live a little, cause every day the sun will rise. Wake up!
Alright, comba, nipple.
Oh,
Nipple.
no.
Nipple. Nipple.
Comba nipple.
Oh no, I'm not saying that. That's my like hairs on my arms are like sticking up right now.
Seriously, who came up with that word nipple? It's hypnotizing. Anyway, welcome to the Terrace Up My Heart podcast. Thank you once again to the amazing Run River North for opening us up with the acoustic version of their feel-good, peppy single, Wake Up. Tonight we cover week 30, Not Guilty, where Tupas and Emeka go on a classy date together, Kai unleashes his comedy to the world, and the revolving merry-go-round that is Rio and Vivi continues, except in this episode, it's Vivi who smells. Smells good in a sensual way, that is. I'm your host, Jaehan, and I am joined by my typical co-hosts, Lucy Lee and Daniel Che. Guys, how's it going?
It's going.
Good.
It's going well. Yeah, this was a packed episode to get through.
Before we get to that packed episode, though, icebreaker question of the night is, given your personality and your philosophies on life, which cast member from any season do you think that you'd be so diametrically opposed to that you'd actually get into a fight with them, given their own philosophies and beliefs? Lucy, let's start off with you.
Mine's probably a universally hated person, which is Yudai. And I don't know, I couldn't think of anyone that would like personally irk me, but not everyone else. I think he kind of fits that mold for me. He just professes, I think the main thing is he says a lot of things, but he doesn't actually follow through on it. And for me, at this age, it just feels very like not cool, you know, to like be doing that. So
Gotcha. Cool.
Yep.
Yudai was frustrating and very immature and left the house too early, probably. Dan, what about you?
I thought about this a lot, but I landed on Noah, who was in the
Interesting.
opening New Doors season. There's nothing that really stood out. Like, he was a fine character, but I think your question was like who would I diametrically be opposed to? And I think there's a lot of little things that, you know, kind of just don't vibe with me. Like, I thought, like, his backstory, it seemed like his dad is, like, you know, a very wealthy person and he comes from a lot of money. And there, I don't know, he just carries himself, like, with this, like, arrogance at all times. And, you know, there's the drinking, there's the crazy hookups. Actually, there was a lot of drinking. I got nothing against drinking, but there's like this vibe of being a jock that I feel like I would clash with. So that's my choice.
That's so interesting. I was talking to Lucy about him, and I don't know if you've seen the Mindy Kaling's new show, Never Have I Ever, and there's this character called Paxton Hall Yoshida, who is this jock on the show, and he's mixed too. He's half Japanese, and I was like, hey, this kind of like Noah, huh? But Paxton Hall Yoshida is a little more endearing on Mindy's show. But yeah, that's interesting that you came up with Noah. I think for me, it was close between two characters, but I eventually landed on, I think her name is Cherie from Aloha State.
Yes,
Yep,
I
that's a
I
good
Oh
one.
my
remember her.
goodness,
Yeah.
she was just terrible. There was no room for improvement or even just compromise. I don't think she cared what people thought.
Yeah.
And her
Yeah.
philosophy was always like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. If you don't like it, tough luck. And she gaslit a lot of people and was telling she was telling her friends different stories about other people and like crisscrossing lines so that people thought something about another person because they heard it from Cherie, even though it wasn't true. And then when they confronted her about it, she's like, so what? You know, it would just irk me so much, the injustice of how a person can like live their life in that way. Not to mention that she was hooking up with like random dudes all over the place.
Right.
And she felt the most like American reality TV show trash that Terrace House has ever gotten. I was like, this is so ratchet, and it just feels like it doesn't belong. So yeah, definitely Cherie from Aloha State, and then not close second, but second would probably be Shohei, because I think Shohei from this
Which
current
one?
season,
Oh,
the shrimp philosophy, fake Renaissance.
tempura?
Yeah, fake Renaissance man guy who thought he could be jack of all trades and all this stuff, which to some extent makes sense if you're interested in a lot of different things. But I think the way he went about trying to articulate his philosophies while not incorporating the advice anybody else had was just kind of, I think he was too smart for his own good, or he thought he was too smart for his own good. So those would be the two main people.
Nice.
Cool. All right. Before we dive in, as usual, please follow us on Twitter at Terrace Heart Pod. You can follow us on Instagram and YouTube as well, under the names Terrace Up My Heart. First and foremost, though, or most specifically, please check us out on the Apple Podcast app and give us a 5-star iTunes rating and review. Tonight, we have another review, and it comes from Wes2225. We don't think it's Wes from Aloha State, but we're going to pretend like it's Wes. Instagram. So Wes2225, he gave us 5 stars. This review is entitled Chatting Amongst Friends. If you love Terrace House, this is a great podcast to listen to for some analysis and discussion of what's happening in the house. The focus for the 3 hosts is on an almost sports show-like episode-by-episode breakdown covering subjects like Most Improved, MVP, Defensive Player, Code of the Week, etc. Their friendly banter creates a welcoming environment filled generously with humor and insight. Extra props for the cool intro song. So there you go, Run River North with the props.
Nice.
And
New
thanks
fan.
for the-
That's very nice of you.
Thanks for the affirmation on the humor and insight. Always good to know. And Wes actually DM'd me on our Instagram and said that he was a fellow Trojan. So fight on, Wes.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
There you go.
Fight on. Sorry, Lucy.
It's okay. I think we're beyond that now, right?
We are. But yeah, thank you, Wes. And if you want to follow in Wes's footsteps, please leave a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, and we will read it in a future episode. You can also catch us on Spotify and Anchor. All right. Week 30 now, right? Not guilty. Quick summary. Tupas and Emeka go on a really classy date together, and Tupas somehow steps his dating game up. Kai's stand-up comes into play, and nipple. Vivi and Rio get more flirty with Emeka and Hana in their presence on the couch. And then Kai comes back home and debriefs with the group on his quote-unquote comedy set. Then Emeka and Tupas have a nice little mundane moment talking on the couch, just talking about how nice it is to just be lazy together and talk about some plans to maybe eventually go to Japan's version of Disneyland. Vivi and Rio watch a movie together on the couch. Hana spies on them once again. Hana talks with Emeka about waving the white flag, and Emeka steps up and says she's going to ask Rio once and for all what the hell is going on. It's the basic gist of this episode. Let's dive right into it. General impressions first here. Daniel, you mentioned that you felt like it was action-packed, but any other general feeling or sentiment that you came out of this episode with?
This will forever be remembered as the Salaryman stand-up episode. So I thought I was going to talk a lot about that, but rewatching this episode, I am surprised at how much I dislike Rio. And I'm sure we'll get into that, but
yes,
he is not a great person. But that was my general impression of the episode.
Yeah. Lucy?
I rewatching this, I think the Rio, kind of the little things that Rio did really stuck out more. Maybe it's because we know something later, but I think for me, to sum it up, I had like Avril Lavigne level teenage angst, like against Rio, just like
Nice.
just whatever, like those feelings you feel like towards someone who's just so frustrating and you don't know how to like communicate that to him. Like that's how I felt. So
Yeah, that's fair. I think for me, it was a pretty well balanced episode in terms of you're not really sure if there was one main character, because I feel like we got pretty big developments from a lot of people, but it was almost separated. They didn't really intertwine. There were several arcs going on at the same time, so I thought that was pretty interesting. But man, the stand up, I could barely get through this episode because of that. And then Rio too. Now that I think about it, everything's just piling on top of each other. I'm surprised I did get through this episode. Yeah. But here we are to get through it together. All right, so let's start off with our highlights of the night. Dan, what was your highlight of the night for this episode?
I thought I was gonna again choose Kai. That is a highlight, but I assumed we'll talk about that later. To me, what stood out on the rewatch was when Hana, Vivi, and Mio are on the couch together. And, Hana, after like 3 minutes of the camera showing how frustrated she is with, the situation goes on, has a conversation with Vivi. Like, it is the most passive-aggressive, like, conversation that maybe ever existed on the show, but it's so brutal to Rio because, like, the camera keeps cutting to him, like, just looking like a fool. So that was my highlight of the night. For, like, one of the things that are said is, like, Hana asks Vivi, how do you go after a crush? And then Vivi responds by saying, I would make my feelings clear. Cut to Rio with his hands on his head like this. And he's like this. But he just looks miserable. So that was my highlight.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's great. Lucy, what about you?
Yeah, I wanted to say Kai stand up too, but I mean, I guess that's pretty obvious. But so I will say that it's Hana's reaction to Kai's stand up, or just overall, like, the flip in her reaction to Rio versus Kai now. And if you kind of observe her facial expressions, because she wears her heart on her sleeves, like when she's sitting on the couch with Rio and all the girls, she's kind of over it. She's just like looking at her phone, not really engaged, because she knows that maybe he's not interested. But then right when Kai comes home, it's like that Emika turnaround moment to Tupas. Like when Kai comes home, Hana's like, welcome home, like, oh, and then welcoming him, helping him like put the flowers in the vase and encouraging him about his stand-up. So I thought that was super endearing, like, and you can see the shift in her interests now kind of shifting.
That's a really good point. I'd venture to guess, though, at this stage, she doesn't have strong feelings towards Kai, but maybe she just wanted to be saved from that moment. And Kai was there, and she's like, oh my God, you're here.
Yeah, there's like there's like a glistening in her eyes, though. Like she's like, you can see sparkling in her eyes, like in that moment when he comes home.
He is her escape rope. Shout out to Pokemon.
Yes. You're right. And they also, in this episode, talk about Trampoland. And we will get to Trampoland.
So good.
So good.
That was one of my intro options, Trampoland. Okay, but my highlight of the night, because this episode has so much just cringe in it, I decided to go for something a little bit more wholesome, kind of like Lucy. And I really enjoyed the debrief with Kai on his stand-up comedy set, because for as cringeworthy as that set was, I felt like Vivi did a really good job of laying down the law to him in terms of how he probably should not do that bit about the salary man, because I'm saying it like him now too, the salary men, because he has no experience like living that sort of life. And she was just saying it's so dark, and I thought she put it pretty delicately, but so she was technically the bad cop in that situation. And this is probably the only time where Rio was actually okay. And Rio was kind of the good cop, because he was there to empathize and commiserate with Kai's disappointments, and also encourage him by saying, like, I know exactly how you feel. Like, after a bad basketball game, I just want to be like, fuck. And and he was just there to tell Kai, you just use it as, your turn your defeat and these negative feelings into, channel it into productivity later on. Or that's the vibe that I was getting from Rio. So I thought that really helped Kai in a moment where you could tell that he was super down. First being greeted by Hana in the way that he did. And then coming over to the couch where, yes, he had a tough conversation with Vivi, but I think she delivered it in a pretty constructive way. And then Rio also just being there to be like, no, I know exactly how you feel, man. It's just going to be part of your growth. And so I think Kai even says there's a lot to learn with debriefing with others, like verbatim in that scene. So I liked, again, the camaraderie and just the personal growth aspect of this scene. It's very Terrace House-esque, where everybody comes together to try and, you know, build somebody back up. So that is my highlight of the night.
Nice.
All right, let's move on to MVP. Dan, who is your MVP?
Okay. I'm going to give it to Emika. I thought in the midst of all this cringe and randomness from the stand-up to the whole love triangle thing, she came off the most grounded and reasonable, first on her date, and in the way, secondly, in her, lazy Saturday normalness with Tupas on the couch, and lastly, her confronting Rio at the end of the episode. So she got a lot of points for me. I just really like how her story arc is like she comes off as this girl who really cares about her own image, but I really appreciate the normalness of her, and, you know, she's just a girl that is figuring stuff out in front of the world. And so she's my MVP.
Nice. Lucy, what about you?
Yeah, I had her too, but I'll give a different one. I'm just gonna give it to Kai. Like, I'm just gonna straight on give it to him. Like, he was not present in most of the episode, but the moment where he was made a huge splash. So props to him for that.
Are you talking about his stand-up set?
Yeah,
Great.
of course. This is the moment we've been waiting for.
Can we just talk about the status?
Okay, let's just freaking talk about the stand-up set. So I have never had a moment in Terrace House where I have literally taken my pillow and stuffed it into my face and screamed into it, because that's how excruciating it was.
Jaehyun, can you reenact this in the when you put the video together? Just like put it like in that fourth corner. Just like.
Oh, it was so painful. And then I think I had to text Dan while it was happening, actually, because I just couldn't get through it. And it's like 1 a.m. at night, and I was just like, somebody save me from this moment. I know I can press pause, but it's just like so excruciating. And the room and the setup of the stand-up comedy show too was so compact, and I felt so claustrophobic to begin with. I can only imagine what it would have been like to be there. Yeah, what about you guys?
Okay, so this is kind of, I'm going to jump ahead here, and this is my random observation going into the very end. I have this theory, and I mentioned this to you guys earlier. What if Kai is a comedic genius? Right, this is my theory. Okay, just hear me out here. He is so, like, genius comedically that him being on the show and like building this whole narrative up, being a comedian and getting the entire world excited, and then bombing the comedy show is like the ultimate punchline, right? So this is probably not true, but it helps you get through the cringe through this episode. And spoiler alert in the episodes to come. But I always like, I ever since I mentioned it to you guys, like every time he comes up, like there's a twinkle in my eye, and I go, this guy's really, if this is a troll, if this is the ultimate troll in the world, like this is genius. So I'm a fan of Kai. He could be the most genius character on the show.
It kind of goes back to, you know, how I said that I channeled Tommy Wiseau in The Room, and some people were like, is this guy a comedic genius?
Right, exactly.
So we don't know what spectrum he falls on. It's like that Joaquin Phoenix movie that he did where people thought he had gone off the deep end, and he was doing interviews in the, like, I don't know, it was bizarre, but maybe Kai's doing that. Lucy, your thoughts on his stand-up?
Yeah, I feel like at this point, like, you know, when stand-ups talk about their early career, they always say they bombed, right? Like, they bombed so hard. And so I'm like, okay, like, I guess it's expected for them to bomb, but he bombed so hard.
Yeah.
Like, it was not even a
man.
question of, oh, like maybe if he worked it out, it would be better. He needed to just cut like entire things out of his set. And like he talks about, I think the dog joke was like semi funny.
It was fine. It was fine.
Right. And then the nipple thing, fine, whatever, right? But then like those
Nipple.
two things that were actually funny, he didn't care to elaborate on
Yeah.
them. But the one thing that wasn't funny, he went on
elaborated.
for so long.
That's right.
And so it kind of, I don't know. And then to top it off, at the end when the MC is like, "Jeez, mate, that was so dark." Like coming from someone who's never worked a hard day in his life, like the MC's roasting of Kai in like that 1 minute was funnier than Kai's
relief.
entire set.
Yeah.
So
But Lucy-
I loved it so much.
Can I ask you a question? Did he bomb so bad that maybe he's actually a genius? Maybe he bombed so hard, everyone believed he actually needs to stop, but he's
Right.
okay. I'll stop. I'll drop this.
I think like, yeah,
it's my
how
dude.
can you bomb so hard without intentionally bombing that hard? Like, I feel like you are onto something, Dan. For
No,
sure.
to be very honest, I don't believe in this theory, and I really am. I think about his well-being, like even like beyond the show, like outside the show. I hope he's fine. I hope he's
Yeah.
good.
Okay, I'll pick something out of his, not to dwell so much on the stand-up comedy set.
We
but
have
he
to, we have
does
to.
say one aside that I thought was kind of funny, because he goes, "All right, I have 3 questions." And then he goes on to the, "If a puppy's job is to look here and lay there, what do they do on their day off?" Right? And then he goes, "Second question, why haven't these Japanese salaries?" And then third question, who made up the word nipple? 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 Okay, so in between like 2 or 3 or whatever, he's like, "Don't worry, this is all related."
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty funny, because I was like, obviously they're
Right.
so far apart, but he's like, "Don't worry, this relates somehow." And I was like, does it?
It does it.
So I don't know.
Absolutely
Maybe
does
Dan's
it.
onto something. I'm sure we'll talk more about this set as we keep going. All right, that was MVP, right?
Yep. Who's your MVP?
Moving on to I haven't even given my MVP
Yeah.
yet. Okay, my MVP is Vivi's hair odor, one-upping Rio's odor from the last
Ooh.
episode. Her next
Very
level
nice.
hair. Rio said she smelled like Mitsukoshi, which is a department store apparently. But seriously, that is not my MVP.
Oh.
My MVP of this episode is Tupas,
Okay.
because
Okay.
he gives
Filipino brother.
Well, no, that's not only why. Because he is a direct opposition to whatever the hell Rio's doing in this episode.
yes.
And he shows you what a real man does and how he
Correct.
treats a girl. He's very intentional, chivalrous, thoughtful, took the lead in everything. Emika didn't even have to... The whole day was planned for her, essentially.
Right.
He knew how to make her blush. He knew how to flirt with her, even saying, "Hey, like, this is what Lily Frank is talking about," and he's telling his friends. They watched the movie. They went on a very classy Italian dinner. He gave her a gift, and he had a matching set as well. He pulled out all of the gentlemanly stops, and he even had that very affirming quote where he told her that, or she seems to think that she does not look as good in real life as she does on Instagram, and he was like, "You look 1,000,000 times more attractive in person." So just the way he continues to
That's some heat right
express
there.
and articulate his growing feelings is just really commendable on his part, and just the way he helps Emika also affirm her in her own struggles with that disconnect between Instagram and how she feels in real life. And he says, "What I love about you the most is that there's more than meets the eye." So that's why Tupas is my MVP, just because he's such a stark contrast to Rio that it must be refreshing for audiences to be like, "Oh my gosh."
Right.
And what's crazy is that I think when Rio first came into the house, we all had a pretty positive perspective on him. We're like, "Oh, this guy seems chill," and especially his like friendship with Pepe, we're like, maybe they're on the same path here, and then it's just completely gone off the deep end here.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting. So yeah, those are our MVPs of the episode. Let's move on to defensive player of the episode. Dan?
Okay. I have a lot. Okay. I have a lot to say about this.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm going to say Rio is the defensive player of the game. Somehow he out-defended himself from getting with Vivi. So he's the defensive player of the game. I want to bring up first, so there is a scene where he comes back from Osaka and brings goods.
Yes.
And you can't help but notice the hickey on the right side of his neck. I don't know. Did you guys see that? Did you guys notice that?
I didn't.
There is a hickey right here. So go back, Jaehyun, with your movie magic. I'm sure you'll find it.
Yeah.
And that's the first defensive play of the game. You know, like I'm pretty sure like the people in the house noticed that. If not, he was doing a semi-good job hiding it. But okay. Secondly, he rejects all of Vivi's moves, advances, like on the couch, like even to the point where, like, they're talking about something about being cold or being warm, and then he grabs her hand, and then puts it under the blanket, and I'm just shaking my head. I'm like, this guy is a fool. Like this gal is like basically throwing herself at him, not even like in a direct way, but like he just doesn't have a clue, or something shady is going on and they're hooking up behind the scenes and just not in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Yes. So he is my defensive player of the game.
Like, if that's the case, why? Like,
this okay, so my theory plays into why I hate him so much is his whole purpose of being on the show is to portray this image and to hopefully get onto the Japanese team, right? He wants to be a captain. He's the MVP of some preseason game. The moment he puts a relationship before that goes against his goal of, what he's trying to accomplish.
Right.
And so he is so focused and self-centered on that goal that like he doesn't see the humanity in front of him. And not only that, like he waits for people around him to act so it doesn't tarnish his image. And so, I'm sorry, you guys are hearing all my vomiting on
No,
this is how strongly I feel about him.
This is cathartic for people. Lucy, who is your defensive player of the episode?
it's also Rio, obviously. And just to add on top of everything that Dan said, like, even before they were on the couch, he's like, I might watch a movie on my phone. Like, he just announces, like, I might do this, right? And obviously she wants to join him, but he will never come right out and ask, like, would you like to join me? And then he starts watching on his phone, and she's like, would you like a laptop? And he's like, oh yeah, a laptop might be better. It's like, you can't even do that. Like, just ask for a laptop. It's so infuriating to me. So yes, everything that Dan said, I ditto. And then on top of that, just like piling on even worse things about him.
Well, also the elbow thing where he kind of has it over her hand, and then he's like, whoops, and then she's like, she has to settle for just being like, no, just keep your elbow on top of my hand because your elbow is keeping it warm. And he's like, okay.
So
awkward. Like, this is so weird, dude. What the heck? Like, if he had been upfront at the start, they would have already been macking or something. But instead, we get this like elbow, like he's like this watching the movie. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. I have a tangent question, not to dwell too much on this, but I feel like I've seen this sentiment come up several other times with guys where they're like, I don't want to reject this girl because she hasn't come out and verbally said it. So, that would be kind of assuming on my part. So I don't want to do that. That's a BS excuse, right?
Yeah, that's terrible.
Okay.
So what is the proper approach in that case?
Okay, I mean, in this sense, go ahead, Dan.
Again, I think he's putting this shows his self-centeredness. Like, he's putting his image before the feelings of others and like the people in the house. Like, he cares so much about not hurting somebody that he can't just be direct and tell them, hey, this is how I feel. Like, just to clear the air, just to be, like, what am I trying to say? He can't even just like have a conversation with Hana or with Vivi. Hana and Vivi have to have a conversation to each other with him there.
Oh man.
And then he's answering these questions, which is obviously about him in a different perspective. It's just so frustrating. Like, this guy, oh my goodness.
Yeah, no, I always thought that was such a weird excuse. I guess to a certain extent it makes sense, but when Hana is so obvious and everybody is telling you what's going on, like, you don't have to think that you're going to come off as the bad guy. There's a delicate way to approach that conversation without coming off as like way too assuming or whatever. But do you have anything to add, Lucy, on just...
Yeah, I wanted to like give him the benefit of the doubt because what he's saying is true. They haven't professed their love, forwardly. And I guess if he's feeling how he feels, like maybe he's just not interested in either of them. And if they haven't professed their love, he can't really reject someone before they profess their love. That's the only way I can rationalize what he's doing. But even then, I think because he can pick up the clues, he can just go on. I think ideally I would want him to just go on a one-on-one dinner with Hana, not avoid, and just say like, hey, I know we've been hanging out. We hung out a couple times, but I just want to say like, I see you as a friend, right? Like I see you platonically and I don't know how you feel about me, but this is my intention. Just like come right out and say it before she even has to. And then maybe she'll feel more comfortable like, oh, okay, like it's clear this way.
Right.
So exactly. You do it that way.
I just want to add one last thing. Yeah. And the panel mentions this. It's Rio, this is the most frustrating thing, is he's technically doing nothing wrong. Like Lucy, you just touched on this. Like he's technically correct in the way he's feeling things, but everyone knows like, hey, just figure this out, or like just have these conversations. Like it's frustrating that you can't really like pin him on something. It's kind of like the politics of our day. Like you can't pin the exact crime on the person, but everyone knows this is just not right. Like something is not right here. And that's the most frustrating thing.
It's just ultimate wishy-washiness by Rio.
Yes.
All right, my defensive player, since you guys both said Rio, I agree with you, but I'll just give something different. It's going to be the stand-up comedy room audience and host, because yikes, no laughs, awkward coughing. The host called it a funeral when Vivi and Hana gave him flowers, because he was like, oh, they must have thought that there was going to be a funeral in here because you're getting flowers. And I was like, oh, what a rejection, what a block. And clearly Kai was feeling so down coming into the house. He had to apologize to everybody, so that was that's my defensive player, the stand-up comedy room audience, and I guess just audience in general, rejecting Kai's form of comedy. All right, let's take it to break, and when we return, we'll wrap up the rest of our awards. All right, we are back. Let's move on to most improved player of the episode. Dan, who is your most improved player?
I'm going to say Tupas, but for exactly the reasons you had for him being the MVP. I think he is the perfect contrast to Rio, and like he could not come off any better after having that breakdown 2 weeks ago, saying he doesn't know how to love because he wasn't loved. Obviously he does, and the best part about it is it feels completely within himself. Like all of his moves or whatever,
that's true,
like he's really smooth, but you get the vibe that he's not trying stuff, it's just who he is. He seems like a very complimenting person, and when he says I think you look a million times more beautiful in person than blah blah, he's believable, and I think that's what's great. And so what an improvement from weeks past.
I only wish he would have said that line in English like Kai does. I think you look a million times more beautiful in person. So,
You're cute. I think you're cute.
Dude. Lucy, what about you for your most improved player?
I had Emika for the same reason that Dan said for MVP. I think the ending scene where she offered to confront Rio was definitely a great move. It was everything that you'd want Rio to do for himself, but couldn't do. And she just was the perfect supporting person for the two girls in the house.
Yeah.
So
that also, not to tie it back to Rio, but I totally forgot that Emika is not even part of this equation, and she has to come in and
Right.
also loop Rio into saying stuff. It's so
Jesus.
crazy. Oh man. But yeah, Emika is also my most improved player. Like Dan mentioned, like just to see her arc from beginning to now, where all of a sudden she's mediating for somebody else, and Hana no less, when they used to butt heads with each other. It's pretty insane. And on top of that, she has her own thing going on with Tupas, where she continues to be super vulnerable and continues to open up about how she actually feels, and it just humanizes her a little bit better.
Right.
She did have that one moment, and maybe we'll get to it later on the couch, but
Sure.
you know, that's a little bit part of her, but overall it seems like she is definitely, we're getting another side of her that for whatever reason she had bottled up, and maybe Tupas has helped her kind of open up a little bit more, but it's even helped her in terms of like standing up for other people, which I thought was just crazy that she even took the lead and mantle on Hana's behalf there. So yeah, Emika is my most improved. All right, what about your guys' favorite panel take or panel quote of the episode? Dan?
I kind of just touched on this. I loved how they pointed out that Rio is not making moves, but he's also not technically wrong, which to me makes him the ultimate pansy. You know, be a person of your word, own your words, own who you are, Rio. I wish my words to you were nicer, but I'm just feeling this right now. Sorry, guys.
No, wait, before we go to Lucy, there was some other things that I want you to touch on, Dan, that they said, where they talk about how they go in depth, obviously, at how non-committal and confusing he is, but they also mention something about him trying too hard to look like the good guy and trying to please too many people. And I think it goes back to that quote where it's like, when you're trying to please so many people, you end up pleasing no one. And that is exactly what's going on here. He's trying to please his basketball fans. He's trying to please his sports team and trying to show them, look, I'm committed. I'm not going to get a girlfriend, so please bring me onto the Olympic team or whatever. Right. He's trying to, what he thinks is pleasing Hana by not rejecting her outright. With Vivi, I don't even know what he's doing, but it's just trying to maintain some sort of like lukewarm, neutral image to everybody, and everybody's just like, actually, we kind of hate you right now. It's not lukewarm anymore, you know. So, Lucy, what's your favorite panel quote or take of the episode?
Yeah, there's a quote where you, the older lady, going off of what they were saying about Rio, she was like, "That's why he can't win in basketball. You have to know how to know how to play offense." And I was like, man, this is so meta right now for our podcast.
Great catch.
You with the
basketball. So I was
knowledge.
like, this is so true. Like, and Dan, I'm sure you know his season, but I looked at the loss. Like after the first couple wins, it's pretty much all losses.
Right.
It's so sad. And yeah, I think they hit it right on the head with that basketball line.
Yeah.
6 points, 3.5 assists, man. Anyways, my panel quote take of the episode was when Yamachan was commenting on Hana and Kai's interaction when they're like, trampoline? And then Yamachan's like, Kai, I don't think I've ever seen Kai been more excited about anything since he came into this house than he was about Trampoline. What's going on? That's kind of weird. But yeah, Trampoline is for the future, but something to look forward to for both Kai and Hana, two people who probably need a trampoline in their lives the most. All right, let's move on to, I think we have quote of the episode and cringeworthy left. Which one do you guys want to do first?
Why don't we let's go to cringeworthy.
Okay, let's do Shacked in a Fool most cringeworthy moment of the episode. Dan, take it away.
It's got to be Nipple. I rewatched it today, and I know exactly what happens. Like this is probably my third watch, and even on this third watch, I had to stop and I had to stop the episode. I was like, oh my god. This is so crazy. Like I knew what was gonna happen, and I had to stop. So that's it for me.
You didn't like the ASMR that happens when you go nipple.
Dude,
okay,
that's why he's a genius. I'm telling you. Like
we're talking about this
exactly.
Like,
he was trolling the world,
and he's making us laugh right now.
I think one of you guys like set up like the outline of his jokes, and like it perfectly makes sense. Like anyway, I'll drop it.
Oh man, savant right there.
Yes.
Lucy, you're Shacked in a Fool most cringeworthy moment.
Yeah, I completely agree with Dan, but I'll give a less offensive one. It's when all three girls are sitting on the couch with Rio there, and I think Emika says something about like like use daddy's credit card, or like you have daddy pay for like a Korean gyukaku or whatever. I'm craving
Bye.
yeah, Poppy or something. Yeah, I was like, oh man, Emika, you were doing so good.
Right.
But the inner
So good.
the inner like demons just came out in that moment. I don't know what she was saying or doing, or like it was obviously some kind of flirtation tactic, but I'm not even sure why. Like, I don't know.
I don't know if she was flirting with him, but probably just trying to be overtly cutesy in that moment.
Yeah,
Not for any particular reason, but
Okay.
just like, buy me, papa.
That
And
sounds
she just
like,
laughs her own joke. Papi, papai.
No one else is laughing though.
or she had drank a lot before she
that's
sat on the
true.
couch.
Sure,
That's true.
that's fair. But yep.
It's nice to know the old Emika's still in there somehow. We're just getting to, we just need a reminder.
It's a process. It's a
Don't
process.
forget about
That's why you appreciate the art.
Exactly. All right. My Shacked in a Fool most cringeworthy moment was when Vivi had her hair splayed out onto the couch and Emika's sitting next to her, and then Rio's there. And Rio all of a sudden goes in for like a real sniff. And it's like he's bobbing for apples and like just no hands and sniffs the hair. And he has to do that across from Emika. He has to cross Emika's path because she's sitting in between them. And I was just like, yikes, what is that? It's just the one time he actually makes a move, and it's the most bizarre and cringeworthy move, just leaning over with his neck and smelling. And that was awkward. I'm sure Vivi enjoyed that, but it was also super weird. She's like, of all the moves you would make, this is the one that is done to me. This weird, yeah. So good job, Rio. Cringeworthy moment of the night. All right, here we are. Quote of the episode. Dan, what
All right,
is your
sorry.
quote of-
This is just a Rio bashing episode. I'm sorry, but they're on the couch. Netflix isn't working, and then they're getting frustrated. Hana's like, maybe it's the wrong password, and then it cuts to Vivi saying, "We need a credit card." No. Rio says, "We need a credit card," and then Vivi offers, "I'll go grab mine. It's all right. Stay here." And then Rio, okay. I don't know. That just really, I think it's just everything building to that. It just,
indicative
Rio.
of him, essentially.
yes. Perfect. Yes.
Lucy, what about you?
To add on to the Rio bashing, like, why is Hana doing his laundry for him? Anyway, my quote
Jesus.
my quote is when Hana like says, "Oh, did you find your laundry?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, thank you for doing that." And she was like, "I sniffed your laundry." And so
Good one.
and I'm like, maybe is smelling like a sign of like I'm into you, because clearly there's a lot of smelling motifs going on here. Like Vivi
Yes.
smells good, or she keeps saying like Rio smells good, and then Hana wants to like put herself in the ring too, so she says, "I sniffed your laundry" as like a last ditch
Right.
effort.
I think everyone's just caught up in a whirlwind of passive aggressive, or no, sorry, indirect language. So maybe perhaps this is their way of flirting, like to show or suggest some kind of intimacy, like, oh,
Yeah.
this is how you must smell, blah blah blah, and so.
Yeah, it must be that. But
so
because I've
frustrating.
never seen the smelling motif in any other seasons, so it can't be like a cultural thing, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. This isn't my quote of the night, but to go off of that, Emika did say something pretty funny, and I'm pretty sure it's just lost in translation, but the literal English translation, when they were talking about how good Vivi smells, even from the moment she walked in, Emika goes, "The way you smelled shocked my nostrils." I was like, that seems a little bit extreme. Okay, but
It's literally extreme.
smelled shocked my nostrils. My quote of the night has already been said throughout the episode, so I'll go with one of my last options, and it was when Kai comes into the house and he's like, gomen, which is like sorry. And they were like, why? He was like, I bombed. And then Hana's like, you didn't bomb. I thought you were funny, blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, shut up. shut up.
I noticed
and she's
that
like,
too.
why? So just another one of the Kai's cringe in Japanese or English at this point. So
That's awesome.
yeah. Okay.
Oh, he's so great.
I think that's it, right?
That's all our categories? Yeah.
That's all their categories.
I do want to bring up maybe this is something worth looking into. The Hickey. This is, and again, I watched this episode 3 times now. At first I thought, oh, like Ryo must be hooking up with people outside. Like I wrote down like in my notes, like Ryo hooked up with somebody in Osaka. But I noticed when he's talking with Vivi, this is before the couch, Vivi's very frustrated. Like she gets her hair done. Like she's obviously waiting for Ryo to come back. It made me wonder, like, are they hooking up outside or like beyond the camera? Like, because she says something like every time I see you or you come back, it feels like you don't know me or something. There's like clearly this frustration, like that the on-camera chemistry is not translating outside. And so I don't know. When you find that screenshot, check that scene.
Okay, I'll check that out. Yeah, well, you transitioned us into the random observations portion to close our show out. So if anybody has anything they want to throw out there, now is the time. Any small observations, Lucy?
This is just my own quirk, but like I'm curious what show they were watching on Netflix.
Yeah.
Because he was describing the show, and I think it's a show that I've watched, which is called Atypical. It's like this guy with Asperger's, and he's dating this girl, and it's just like high school life. But the way he was describing the show, it sounded like that, which I thought, oh, that's pretty cute. Because I really like that show.
Interesting. And they were laughing a lot, right? They, Emika and Hana could hear them from upstairs just laughing. So
yeah, it's like, yeah, I guess, I don't know. Curious.
So I don't know if you caught this, but when the scene where Ryo comes out of his room and Hana's on the couch on her phone when he comes back from Osaka with the treats, I, for whatever reason, I was able to catch his facial expression, but the camera had it to the door and Hana is like up against it on the couch.
I did notice this.
And Ryo opens the door and he sees Hana on the couch and he's like, fuck.
Yeah.
You see the facial expression. He's like, God damn it.
Man.
He's like, I have to interact with this girl again. He's like, hey, do you like treats? Because I came from Osaka with treats. And it was just so bad. So that was one observation I had. I had another question. I also had an observation with regards to just a question like Lucy had. But do you think Lily Frankie hooks Tupas up with some cash to take Emika out? Because he's been spending a lot of dough, and it's been pretty expensive at a certain point. But just something to think about. I wouldn't be surprised if he did, but you know.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because he does seem to spend a lot on her. I just think, in contrast to Ryo, who can't pay for damn Netflix, like it seems like a lot. So, I mean, he just paid for dinner, movie, and a gift. That was probably a lot, but
That's
I think
true.
it just shows how nice Tupas is. Patos.
Dan, do you have any other random?
Kai is a comedic genius. If listeners, if you're listening, just watch the episodes with this in mind. Just please just give it a shot, please. That's my parting thought.
Okay, my parting thought in line with that is let's talk about Kai's painting, his next level Ruka painting.
Sure.
Where when you tell it, Dan, because I think who is it? Ryo asks him, "Did you paint this?" And like, what is this about? And he essentially says, "This is a eye. It's like an eye growing from a stem, an eyeball." And he says, "Oh," and he says it so nonchalantly, but when you hear him say it, you're like, "Oh, that's actually what?" He's like, "Oh, it's at a random location. There's a sprout of consciousness that blooms into a flower."
It's savant-esque, would you not say? Like
Yes,
it suggests he's
agreed.
maybe a genius.
Maybe because it's just one. It's one petal of consciousness that eventually forms into multiple petals of a fully formed thought. I mean, just Kai.
Amazing. I actually thought that painting looked dope.
Yeah.
And I would wear that on a shirt or something.
Kai should train Ruka to explain his art better, because if he just did it like that, I'd be like, wow, that's crazy.
I actually like his art. I like it. Yeah.
No,
It's like-
It's great.
legitimately good.
It really is good.
Yeah.
There's like a thought process behind it that you can follow. So, yeah. All right, Lucy, nothing else?
Oh, they mentioned that Kai has a shirt that says like my diet begins tomorrow.
Oh.
I want that shirt.
You should have
If
just worn
anyone
that
knows-
shirt up there.
Yeah. That's my last parting thought. If anyone knows where to find that shirt.
You have to say Poppy though. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I need Poppy to buy me that shirt.
Oh man. Wow.
All right. With that said, that'll wrap it up for the Rio roasting hour. Rio and Kai roast hour. Sorry, guys. I mean, you guys seem like... Actually, I think we turned it back around on Kai, actually. We're more accepting of him. So
Yeah.
Rio, just play better basketball, at least, if you're going to be this way. Oh, geez, man. This is some harsh stuff. Don't want to burn any bridges again with any of these people. But there it is. I'm sure you guys are great people if we actually met you in person. But with that said... Thank you for listening to Terrace Up My Heart. Catch us on all the socials, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. Also catch us on the Apple Podcasts, iTunes app, Spotify, and Anchor. And with that said, Dan, Lucy, catch you next week.
See you guys.
Trampoline.
Yeah.
Thanks, Wesley.
Trampoland.
Bye.
We ain't got no money, but we got lots of time. So let's spend a little, live a little, 'cause every day the sun will rise.
Wake up!
Come smell the roses, oh, come take your time.